my people. So I just want to talk real quick about, what to do with your money in a recession or a phase of deleveraging or a depression. So if you've done as I asked or told you to, and you've gone and listened to Ray Dalio's economic machine video, you understand that there's basically three different sort of market indicators or cycles that we go through. So there's the actual economic growth, right? That's more of a flat line, not much up and down in that. It's like we're basically in a phase of a certain amount of increase to GDP or to productivity across the world. So as people are born, they get jobs, they build houses, they make food, they like all this stuff. There's a certain amount of just almost like consistent growth across time. Then there's the short-term debt cycle, which is basically like 3 to 5 years, these small ups and downs, busts and booms kind of thing in the stock market is where it's very evident. And essentially every 3 to 5 years, the stock market might lose 10% at some point in that year. And it takes a minute to, a while to recover and get back up to a new, what we would call, bull market. So those small things are basically tides driven mainly by access to money. So if you look at that video, just to brief it real quick, like one man's spending is another man's income, or woman's. Gotta be fair here. One woman's spending is another man's income, right? So if person A spends money, buying products from this business, well, the business owner and employees, et cetera, earn money, right? And the more this one spends, the more this one earns, and the more this one earns, the more they can spend. So the next one gets more, right? So every person's spending is another person's income. Well, at some point, if you've borrowed money to build a business, you're going to have to kind of tighten the belt and spend. So when you borrow money, it allows you to spend more than you earn. But if you put that money into good production and grow your business, you'll earn more in the future. But at some point in the future, you're going to have to spend less than you earn in order to pay your debt, right? So that's sort of the reason that there's like a, I take a loan, I invest, then I have to pay it back. And so there's this, and it's uphill climb. So it's up and down going up, right, over time. Then there's the long-term debt cycles. And these are more like every 70 years. This is what happened in the Great Depression. And here we are again. Ray Dalio, actually, I saw him in an interview saying that basically we're in a phase of deleveraging, he calls it. He doesn't want to say the word depression. But in a Great Depression, certain things like interest rate has been bottomed out for so long that when debt gets out of control, there's not a way to just bottom out, right? Like a lot of times if the economy starts slowing down, the Fed can reduce interest rate, stimulates the economy because now there's cheap access to dollars. So you can get cheap loans to reinvest. So let's say a company only makes on average, 15% profit in their company across. I'm just going to try and simplify it, making 15%. Well, if they have to borrow money at like 7-8% to put into their business, minus what am I trying to say? Minus that percentage from your debt, minus taxes, minus all this stuff, their profits are very small. So if debts are high, if it costs a lot to lend money, borrow money, you're not going to do it. Or you're not going to be as excited or willing to do that as if money is cheap. So if the Fed reduces the interest rate, and let's say you can now borrow money for 3, 4, 5% interest, that's much more attractive to that business. You're going to have a lot more profit. So as the Fed ups and raises and lowers interest rates, businesses react. But once we've lowered it to stimulate the economy, and then we have this, time of, solid business, and we start having a decline, Fed lowers it again. Once it gets bottomed out, and it's stayed bottom out for a long time, and we start having that downturn again, the Fed can't help. The only option then, or there's other options, but one of the big options is to print money. And in that phase, cash is devalued, right? So here we are right now in essentially at some point on that downturn, we're in that phase. So what do you do with your money when the economy's going down, in a sense, the stock market's dropping, the federal interest rates already bottomed out, it's been that way for a long time, they're going to start pumping stimulus packages into the economy, which essentially means they're going to print cash and give it to certain people. Holes in the market will happen in a recession, and what essentially is kind of accepted as the thing to do is to print money and fill those holes with that money. So currently, with the market having been shut down for, 2 months, we've had a lot of basically social distancing and quote unquote unessential businesses closed, right? Now there's big holes in a lot of areas in the market. So we're going to pump money into those holes to make sure that they sort of are lifted up for, so that we can kind of get back to some sense of normalcy before we really have to deal with that. So when we print money, the cash that we own is devalued. And so cash is not going to perform well in a recession or a depression. But what else can you do, right? Because basically in a recession, if you look back to the Great Depression, most markets struggled. So you might, there's a lot of markets that are going to go down, but which one is kind of the best, right? The least of the evils. But then there's always opportunity, and that's the crazy thing that we're experiencing right now. Is never before in a recession have we had the power to work for, people we don't know in a freelance world in a virtual environment. So there's certain things that you kind of got to look at the market and go, well, some things are going to do better than they've ever done, right? In COVID, if you go look at like Zoom, stock price went crazy. Well, Zoom's not new. It just got crazy in this market. Shopify, even bigger, went crazy. Amazon, not a new company, basically thought to be out of like the growth phase and more into like a big, large market cap business, and whatever their stock price went up, because they cater to services that survive in a COVID-19 social distancing environment. So the answer is not to pull your money out of all markets, put it under your bed, and hope you survive, because it's a guaranteed loss if you pull it out, put it under your bed, government prints money, your money's worth less if it doesn't get stolen. You still lose. So you have to remember that risk is about education. If you are educated, risk is reduced, right? So when, like I've heard Warren Buffett basically say that diversity is for uneducated people. It's to like basically save yourself from the bad decisions that you will definitely make, because you don't know what you're investing in. So just invest in a lot of stuff, and it'll kind of balance out, and in the end you'll probably be up 10% or 8% or whatever. A similar thing, right? Doesn't it seem risky to put all your eggs in one basket or just a few baskets? It is for a normal person that's just betting red or black. But it's not risky for people. It's not as risky for people like Warren Buffett or Ray Dalio, or people that have teams researching, and they have a ton of knowledge and historical like experience in this industry, and they can pick the winners from the losers, right? So risk is reduced. So everything's risky. You're risking your money if you keep it in cash. You're risking housing market if you keep it in your equity in your house. You're risking, certain stocks if you put it in, energy stocks or automotive stocks or tech stocks or whatever. You're risking something. Now, in a state of, deleveraging, where the Fed can't save us by lowering interest rates, the best thing is they're going to print money, and certain industries are going to struggle. So what do? You've got to basically also imagine, like, you have to realize that all currencies, all these things that we call currency or money, is made up. Like, cash is paper. Like this is not worth like beans, except for that we decided, when it's stamped like this and has like a federal approval on it, like, then it's worth a certain amount, right? Like, it's made up. This is paper. It's like monopoly money, but we decided that it has a certain value, right? The same thing goes with a stock. Like, when we purchase a stock, basically we have to say, what's the value of this company? Like, what does each share, like, what's a fair price to pay for a piece of this company, right? When you buy Microsoft, is it fair to pay, $187 a share, or should this be $250 or what? Like, it's all sort of made up. We're basically just assigning value to things. And so you have to understand that, like, even in a recession, a boom or bust, certain things are going to hold value better than others or gain value, right? So it's really interesting that the economy has taken a big hit. I'm just going to say this for you guys because it's kind of fun. I am currently up in the year 2020, as of last week, end of May. I'm up over 16% in the stock market for this year. But if you look at the average stock in the stock market, it's down somewhere around 15. So how do I have like a 30-something% difference between average and where I'm at? Basically, I picked stocks that would have value in a recession. And investors know that the place to put your money is the one that will get hit the least, right? And so when everyone started running to those stocks, the price actually went up in a recession. So I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but everything's got a certain amount of value in relation to everything else. So when we try to evaluate an oil company in relation to a solar company or a wind power company or whatever, how do those values shift in different markets compared to one another, right? It's like, I don't really know that industry well, but it's historically been like coal's like one of the cheaper energies, right, compared to like solar panels. But as solar energy gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, then it becomes more of like a real competitor as far as cost. But what happens in the future? What happens in recessions? What happens when there's wars fought over oil fields? Like, what happens over this stuff? Maybe solar becomes the thing to have, right? So you got to kind of think through, like, what things in this economy are going to hold value the best in relation to all these other industries, and put your money there. Even if it goes down, at least it won't go down the same as all these other things, right? A lot of companies literally go out of business in recessions or depressions, deleveraging phases. You don't want your money in there, but assets outperform cash basically 100% of the time. Think about risk. Like, I just had a conversation with somebody the other day that basically said, like, I just don't have the tolerance for risk like you do, so I can't put my money in the stock market until I have, he said, like, $30,000 in my checking account. And I went, risk? That's risky, putting 30 grand in your checking account with no money invested. What's the average income or growth of the stock market over the last 50 or 100 years? If you're looking at like the Dow Jones or S&P 500, somewhere around 10% growth year over year. What's the average return of cash over the last, as long as cash has existed? The average growth is -2 or 3%. So it's basically guaranteed to lose you money. And if you put it in a checking account, you might get that like 2% back, right? So you, at best, you stay flat. At best, you stay flat if you keep cash in a checking account. If you keep it under your bed, you get -2-3%, right? Put in the stock market, just invest in an index fund that follows the S&P 500, 10% annual growth, right? Which one's more risky? Risk is a word that uneducated people throw around, because guess what? It's all risky. I just want to tell you that. It's all risky. So anyway, I know I've kind of stammered through this thing, but it's an interesting idea to understand, like, value of assets and how they'll perform in different markets and what you want to be in when things go crazy, right? And that's why Ray Dalio has a certain balance of assets, so that when one market tanks, that's typically when the other one does well. Like, people will run to that one, so it goes up. This one tanks and people run over here, and so it goes up. And he kind of basically keeps this nice balance of funds, and so he almost always protects his downside. It's like his whole trick: protect your downside, and you'll do good, because there's a certain amount of real growth happening over time, and you just need to catch it, right? So anyway, I hope it was helpful. It wasn't the best conversation with a video camera I've ever had, but I hope that you got some concepts from this video that help you understand markets, value of assets, risk, and what you can do to protect your downside, or even get an upside in a bad market.